Hi, good evening. I'm Deanne Battle. This is the Composite, and we're a talk show. We're in season 4, episode 15. I'll see how long my dog lets me stay on. She's having a little, panic attack or something right now. She saw a dog out on the patio and she started whining. So that is what it is. I was out running errands earlier, and so I decided to push today's episode back. I hope everybody's doing well. All right, so listen, we are fully freestyling because, like I said, I was out running errands, and the articles and stuff that I wanted to have queued up didn't have the time, so I will be doing that now. So yeah, my hope is to talk through a few articles, read a couple of poems, and then close out. And if you hear the panting in the background, that is the pups. Okay. All right, got that going. Get this going. All right, now go like this. Talking to myself here. My apologies. Now, while I'm getting this set up, for those of you that watch House of the Dragon, I'm in a Facebook group, and a lot of people were complaining that this episode 6 was a little too slow for them. They're not into the political intrigue and character development and stuff like that. And I want to tie that to a thread of conversation that I saw on X, formerly known as Twitter, where a PhD student at Princeton was lamenting the fact that, I should be able to require my students to read 100 pages a day, and, it's unacceptable that I can't do that, or it's unacceptable that people are telling me that that's too much reading. And so I responded a couple of times on the thread because I've been a teacher, an educator for about 12 years now. And when I first, excuse me, a little congested. So when I first started teaching, I kind of had low-key, delusions of grandeur around students enjoying literature. And, the reality is most people don't. Even when I meet people and they tell me they do read, they're reading self-help books, they're reading biographies, and things of that nature. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what he was talking about in terms of novels specifically, that's a niche market. And so if you're teaching, a kind of survey class and it's like a first-year seminar, as an educator, you have to keep that in mind. And so all of that being said, there's a way in which you can teach literature to make it accessible to multiple people, as opposed to teaching it in a way where if you don't meet my standards of reading Dostoevsky, then, you're somehow illiterate or stupid. And so he was getting a lot of pushback online. And of course, given his demographic, he interpreted that as, people don't believe in standards anymore. No, that's not the case. But you need to, number one, have different standards, again, for first year seminar type stuff, which, if he's a PhD student, maybe they have him teaching high level courses. I doubt it. But, there's a certain level of engagement that you can expect from that sort of student versus an actual English major. And teaching is one of the hardest things that I've ever done, but I really credit teaching with pushing me to be more flexible in terms of my ideas about learning and what learning looks like. And so all of that being said, people like him might want to tread lightly, because now you have internet receipts of you being rigid in terms of your approach to pedagogy. And it would be very easy for one of those first year seminar students to have their parents call your manager. I mean, that's just where we are with things now. If they get a C or something in your class. And so you just, have to be nimble. How can I teach a course in a way where they're still getting the fundamentals in terms of what they need to read and decode literature, but, I'm not just having it look one way, right? Am I choosing a wide variety of texts from different perspectives? Am I giving different sorts of assignments? So, for instance, certain students would excel in a presentation versus a paper versus a photo essay versus a creative writing assignment. You have to be flexible if you want to do this work. But on the flip side, it occurs to me that a lot of people that, gravitate toward academia or teaching in general don't necessarily want to be flexible. And depending on their demographic, universities either, let that person do whatever it is they want to do, or are a little more or much more rigid in saying, no, you can't, assign more than X number of pages of reading a night. And he seems like a much younger person, so, he'll figure it out trial by fire. But again, it was just interesting to see people respond on that thread, because most people that thought, oh, it's ridiculous, I should be able to ask students to read 100 pages a day, of a novel, most of the people who said that was a good idea looks like him, versus, the rest of us who were like, yeah, that's a wonderful, utopian aspiration. But at the end of the day, we don't have a reading culture. And, when I think about the history of the United States, I'm not sure if we ever did have a reading culture. I think the difference now is people feel more comfortable articulating that. Like, I'm not dating right now, but the last 2 or 3 dates that I went on several years ago, the guy felt very comfortable saying, oh, you're a writer? I don't read. And then we just, proceeded with the date. Now, obviously it didn't go anywhere because, I, stopped seeing them, but they felt very comfortable in that. And, I'm into book culture, but most people aren't, right? So you have to hold space for that. Even at an institution like Princeton, a lot of those folks, let's keep it real, like if your mother or father know the right people, if they're alums or whatever, if they, pay for a new stadium, a new building, their kid is in there and that kid is in your class. So what are you going to do? And I really feel like people like this guy who have a super rigid stance are contributing to the inequities of a classroom. Because hypothetically, let's say you're like, well, no, this is unacceptable. If you're taking my, gut class, first year seminar in the Great American Novel or whatever, you have to read 100 pages a day. The privileged student is going to say, oh, okay, cool. Let me call up the tutor that I had in high school who wrote all my papers in high school, who wrote my college essay to get me in here. Let me just call that person and just have them, read the stuff or refresh on it and write the papers. And then you have the student who's doing, 20 to 25 hours of work study, whose, parents maybe don't speak English, who might have a disability or, so on and so forth. You're forcing them to perform at the same level as someone who has more resources. And so again, all of that being said, I could see where he was coming from, because, ideally, yeah, people would be able to read 100 pages a day, but everyone that you're teaching now is a digital native, right? So what does that mean? That means that when they learn how to read, they're learning to read primarily on screens, right? And I don't know if I've spoken about this in this space before, but the little bit I know, right, F pattern reading helps you scroll. So an F pattern means that, we in English read left to right. And so, you go across the whole first line, let's say 80% of the second line. And then as you go further down, you read fewer and fewer words. And so if that is how your brain is wired in terms of you learning how to read, then, telling somebody to grab one of these and then read 100 pages, that's super challenging. I struggle every semester that I've taught, explaining to students how to annotate, showing them my annotations, working with them on annotating. So, that the paper process or the research process is much easier because you have your own notes. And it gets harder and harder to get them to invest in that. And so I think this is the disconnect between academia and the rest of society, right? Because you can, depending on your identity, be very stalwart about, no, this is how I want things done. But at the end of the day, if that's not where society is, are you really being effective as an educator? And at this point in my life, as long as I continue teaching, I want to do things that are effective and equitable. And, the discussion that, this very insular group of people were having, it's not effective, right? Because what are the people going to do? They're going to read summaries. They're not going to read the pages you're assigning. They're going to use AI. They'll probably jump to that first because they're initially going to view your requirements as insurmountable. And they're going to immediately move to methods to alleviate their burden, especially when they're taking, depending on the university, 4 to 5 other classes other than yours. And especially if they're not an English major, your course is not going to be a priority. The humanities in our society in general are not a priority. And so ultimately that is those are some of the challenges we're grappling with for those of us that do love literature and want to share that love with students of all ages. And so it's just really disappointing to see that, like, even though people, including myself, were like trying to explain things to him, he just was kind of like, oh, this is woke teaching, and why am I getting so much pushback? And I just felt really sad for any student that's going to be stuck with him as an instructor, because it's going to be challenging in ways that it shouldn't be, right? Like if you're assigning, let's say, several short stories in a novella, is it War and Peace? Is it Great Expectations? No. But can the students still get something very substantive out of it? Can you still have powerful discussions and group exercises and receive highly analytical papers from them? Yes, you can, right? But you have to let go of your narrative around what it is actually that a novel provides you, if that makes sense. I mean, I think that there are things that you can only get in a novel, which is why I'm a novelist, right? That time for world building and intricate description and roaming imaginations. In my opinion, you can only get that from a novel. But again, those are considerations for serious students of literature and writers. And most people are neither of those things. And so, voices like that young gentleman's kind of dominate the discussion, because of his identity, because of the prestigious nature of the institution where he's a PhD student. And again, anyone that doesn't fit, his very rigid idea of what a student should be is going to suffer. And that's unfortunate. Other things. So in terms of news articles that I wanted to look at here, I wanted to take a time to check in, and that sounds super casual, but in terms of things that are happening in Haiti right now, because I do know that the U.S. Partnered with, I don't know how we're working with Kenya, so I'll look into that right now, but asked Kenyan troops to go to Haiti, and it's just kind of like those folks cannot get a break. And I know at the moment, and rightly so, much of the international focus is on what's happening in Gaza, but there's also a very big part of me that is uncomfortable in certain degrees in terms of how when, folks look more like me, that their suffering is invisible. And even though my reach is limited here, I want to counter that narrative. So let's see what we have here. Okay, so this is from U.S. News and World Report. And whenever possible, I will post links so you can see what I'm looking at. And I really try to focus on sources that are as reputable as possible. If you're an American, most of us understand that our mainstream news sources play loose and fast with the truth, but nevertheless, that's what we have. And there's been this weird thing on Instagram where it's not letting me post the link, like if I try to copy and paste. So I'm hoping that will change. I don't know if that's a new policy that they have, but it wasn't an issue for me last week, but this week has been a mess. Or no, I think it started last week, but the first week in July I didn't have that problem. All right, so U.S. News and World Report, it says, Kenya's Haiti intervention needs rapid result, report says. Okay, I'm just trying to scroll to the important parts here. Pardon me. All right. Several hundred Kenyan police officers arrived in the Caribbean nation at the end of June and have been patrolling together with national police as a part of a long-delayed UN-backed mission intended to fight armed gangs that have cemented control over large parts of the capital, Port-au-Prince. Over 500,000 people have been internally displaced. Wow. And close to 5 million people are experiencing severe hunger. This is devastating. Authorities have regained control of the major infrastructure such as the airport and fuel terminal, but the GITOC warned that in gang-controlled areas, civilians depend, quote, almost exclusively, end quote, on regulations imposed by criminal groups. Okay, all right, so the country's basically divided up into turfs. Or maybe if they're just talking about the capital city, Port-au-Prince, it's divided up into turfs. This is really bad. And this is another quote here. By distributing food or petty cash or providing work or social recognition to children enrolled as foot soldiers, the gangs seek to consolidate their legitimacy, the bulletin said, adding that residents feared gangs could use them as human shields against the police and MSS. So that's like the multinational, police force. And then it closes out saying here, hold on. Oh, sorry, it reloaded. It says a handful of countries besides Kenya have formally pledged troops to the mission, first requested in 2022, but it remains unclear when they might deploy to Haiti. So the first thing that I'm wondering, as someone who's not an international news expert, is, so there are, quote unquote, a handful of countries that are pledging troops to this mission, but did Haiti formally request people to come there, or are people just coming there of their own accord, or because the United States told them to come there? Because I'm so struck by how our neighbors in this hemisphere, their autonomy is totally taken away from them. Even though obviously this is a crisis, but, that doesn't mean that we have the right to tell them how to deal with it. And oh my gosh, this page is terrible. Let me reload it once more. And to tie it back to the United States, a couple of people online, because at the moment, that's where I get most of my engagement, just because I haven't been traveling back and forth from work. So most of my conversations have been online for the past few weeks. And a few people had the same point, but a good point. They were talking about how quickly Kamala Harris was able to raise money for her campaign. Once Joe Biden dropped out on Sunday, and then he endorsed her basically between Sunday and yesterday, Tuesday, she's raised millions and millions of dollars because there was a call, Win with Black Women, and then a call, Win with Black Men, and people gave her a ton of money. And, I think it was $81 million. If I'm incorrect, I apologize, but I believe it was $81 million. And a few people had a really great point. And the point, to summarize, is what could we do for our communities, our working class Black communities that are suffering, if we were able to raise $81 million in, 2.5 days. And so I'm bringing this story about Haiti into it. What could we do for our cousins in Haiti if we could raise that much money that quickly? And I'm not saying people shouldn't give money to Harris, but it is disappointing in terms of our priorities. So full disclosure, I am a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated since 2001, right? So for quite some time. And I haven't been active in the last year and a half, but I was in a graduate chapter. And one of the main reasons I became a Delta is because I'm someone who, I want to be engaged. I have hands and a mind that are willing to work, but I'm not an organizer. Like, I don't know how to go about like mobilizing people. So if hypothetically, if you said to me, okay, Deanne, we want to, do a bake sale, or, we want to, organize a dinner, for those that are hungry and, unhoused, so on and so forth. I would be there in a heartbeat as long as I had the time, right? And as long as I wasn't sick. But if you told me to create that, I would be totally lost. And so what I really appreciated and respected about the Deltas in my life before I became a member was the ways in which it was such a hands-on organization, in terms of contributing to the Black community, which is the community, one of many communities, but which is like a focal point for me, a community that I love and a community that I want to contribute to. So it's like, well, I'm never going to be at the forefront leading anything, but I've got hands and I've got a mind and a heart that I'm willing to contribute. And so it is a little disappointing to see that if it's for something that's more prestigious, meaning, oh, the first, Black woman, presidential candidate, major presidential candidate, because we don't want to forget Shirley Chisholm, that you can get so much mobilization, but less mobilization for little Miss Flint, who's still trying to raise money for water filters because the water in her city is still tainted and she still can't drink it. And the young lady has been asking for 10, 11 years now, and she's about to go off to college. And that makes me sad. Now, I, in full disclosure, don't have the funds to really give anyone right now. But again, I can work, and so what would that work look like if we turned it on our neediest members, our most vulnerable members of the Black community and of the Black global community first? What would that really look like? And I don't claim to have a ton of answers for that. But what I do know and what I've witnessed, from attending an Ivy League school, from being a Black Greek, from, joining the proper organizations, so on and so forth, is there's a huge segment of us in the Black community that have so much contempt for the working class and poor that look like us. And I have to say I was probably like in my mid to late 20s. I mean, it's not that I didn't see it, but I couldn't articulate what it was that I was seeing or the responses that I was eliciting from, people, acquaintances, and some friends. And I didn't really know, like when I bring up X and people are so dismissive, or, saying, okay, well, yeah, that's like a Pollyanna idea or whatever. And then I realized, oh, you want to do as much as you can to distance yourself from poor people. Like, you don't want to be seen as poor. You hate poor people. And, even folks that, like, I know for a fact they came from more underprivileged backgrounds, they would get to a certain level professionally and just be like, oh, well, that's their problem, right? Mass incarceration doesn't affect me because I don't do anything that will have me end up in jail. Yeah, but anybody can plant evidence on you, right? And you can immediately be in a different situation. Like, let's move from the theoretical to an example for right now. I've seen Black pundits in clips in, when they're on CNN and stuff, online saying, oh, okay, well, this is going to be perfect because now that Kamala Harris is at the top of the Democratic ticket, the Democrats can pitch this as, oh, the prosecutor versus the felon. That's terrible framing to me. Do you know how many non-violent offenders have felonies for shit that is legal right now, right? So weed is legal in so many states right now, but those men and women who, because I don't know if they were selling weed or if because of the grams that they had on them at the time, they still have felonies on their record. And can they get employed? Can they vote? I think a lot of that depends on what state that you're in. And I will admit that from a civic standpoint, I need to become more educated on that. But when you frame her as a prosecutor, that totally elides the history of criminal justice in this country, right? Which emerged from policing Black people, Black bodies, right? And I make the distinction because Black people in the sense of policing us into more subjugation and fear, in a sense of re-enslavement, but Black bodies in the sense of, and I mentioned this last episode, Harris is complicit in prison labor, right? So not looking at the actual person, but as the body, but in a cell that can do work for free or do work for like 25 cents an hour. And I'm not saying don't support Harris, but there's just something that's emerging since Sunday that doesn't sit well with me in terms of people's approach. You're framing her as a prosecutor and you're framing him as a felon. Is he a felon? Yes. But please make a distinction there. For a violent offense, Donald Trump was convicted of being a sexual predator. That's very different from someone that has nonviolent charges. And it's just, I worry that people are proceeding in a way that doesn't liberate us. That people are proceeding in a way that even as you uplift this woman, so you have a face in a high place, that you are then pushing the people at the bottom even further down. And I didn't mean to go on and on about this, but there's something about this story here about Haiti that very much speaks to that element to me, It's just, but here's the thing, right? The folks in that upper echelon of Blackness, right? You have, if you're familiar with Bethany Frankel, she was, a real housewife of New York, and, she's an entrepreneur. She has, a ton of businesses, and the Skinny Girl Margaritas, stuff. I don't know if she still makes it, but I had it a few years ago. It was good. But she had this video where she was saying, oh, the Hamptons, it's not just rich people, it's Black people too. So these are the people that you're trying to impress? The people who still see your skin color as a barrier to wealth, as a barrier to value, right? There's something wrong with that to me. Right? And there are things that we can be doing in a mutual aid sense for one another to lift each other up in ways that it doesn't happen anymore. And I'm most familiar in a couple of ways. Hold on a second. So my Nana, my maternal grandmother, she spent some time as a union organizer. And so I heard about that a little bit from her, but more from my mother, and in terms of, how she organized and worked with people and represented people and brought people together. And then I was raised, with a lot of Pan-African ideals and rhetoric. And so, one of the things that I was always told to look up to was the ways in which the Black Panther Party started the breakfast program. And so when I hear people being super excited about Kamala Harris on one hand, but then completely ignoring all of the Black people right now who can't afford a place to live, who can't feed themselves, who are suffering, there's something wrong with that. Like, how are you going to, this is not an apples to apples comparison, but how are you going to complain about any sort of systemic oppression when you don't give a fuck about your own people? It's just completely tone deaf. And the level of cognitive dissonance is astounding. And I don't want to imply that that everyone that supports Harris is like this. But again, the conversations that I've been a part of online have very much seemed like they're in that vein. And that is disheartening, and I hope it changes. And I want to be a part of making that change, and I don't really know how to do it right now. So if you have any ideas, my DMs are open. Right now I'm trying to, work on some survival elements myself. I'm packing. I'm still looking for a new place. So I'm not in the best position, but I'm just in a season of my life where gratitude is super important, and that gratitude really leads me to question photo ops, right? So, do we want just the flex of saying, oh, there is a Black-ish person in the White House again, or do we actually want movement? And do we actually want to stop being the bottom caste in this country? That's what I want. I want liberation for my people here and abroad. We deserve our full humanity. And I want to, when I leave this planet, I want to make sure that I've done things to contribute to that in a positive way. And I get the sense from so many people that if they've never been in a downtrodden situation, or if they've risen up for a downtrodden situation, that they don't give a damn about everyone, coming after them. And that is so unfortunate. Because if that was the attitude our ancestors had, we wouldn't be where we are right now. Can you imagine if that was the attitude Dr. King had? He didn't have to do what he did and sacrifice what he did. It's just... marginalized people, in my opinion, desire so much, to be seen and validated by the dominant society, that they are blind to the plight of folks who are in the same category as them. And I just am trying to remind myself not to be that way. I don't know. All right. So today's poems are This first one is by a poet named Justice Ameer. All right, and this is from poets.org. And the poem is called Necessary Conditions. I want the cotton back. I want the fields it grew from. I want the food it bought. I want the clothes it weaved. I want the blood it summoned, the sun it demanded, the scars it paid. I want the cotton back. I want its leaves, its stems, its thorns, its roots. I want everything, but it's white. I want the cotton back. We'll take the cotton back. We'll take back everything it took of us. All right. And so something interesting to note about this poem is that it is all in caps, right? He or they are saying this with their entire chest. So if you're interested, you can go and read. There's an audio of the poet reading it attached to it. All right, and before we close out, this is from the Poetry Foundation, and the poet is Robert Graves, and the poem is called The God Called Poetry. Now I begin to know at last, these nights when I sit down to rhyme, the form and measure of that vast God we call poetry, he who stoops and leaps me through his paper hoops a little higher every time, tempts me to think I'll grow up proper singing cricket or a grasshopper, making prodigious jumps in air while shaken crowds about me stare aghast, and I sing, growing bolder to fly up on my master's shoulder, rustling the thick strands of his hair. He is older than the seas, older than the plains and hills, and older than the light that spills from the sun's hot wheels on these. He wakes the gale and tears through your trees. He sings to you from windowsills. At you he roars, or he will coo. He shouts and screams when hell is hot, riding on the shell and shot. He smites you down, he succors you, and when you seek and where you seek him, he is not. Today I see he has two heads like Janus, calm, benign, that grim and scowling, his beard spreads from chin to chin. This God has power. Oh, excuse me. Goodness, very congested today. Not sneezy allergy, but definitely congested. All right, let me try that stanza again. Pardon me. Today I see he has two heads like Janus, calm, benign, that grim and scowling. His beard spreads from chin to chin. This God has power, immeasurable at every hour. He first taught lovers how to kiss. He brings down sunshine after shower. Thunder and hate are his also. He is yes and he is no. The Blackbeard spoke and said to me, human frailty though you be, yet shout and crack your whip, be harsh. They'll obey you in the end. Hill and field, river and marsh shall obey you. Hop and skip at the terror of your whip. To your gales of anger bend. The pale beard spoke and said in turn, true, a prize goes the stern, but sing and laugh and easily run through the wide airs of my plain, bathe in my waters, drink my sun, and draw my creatures with soft song. They shall follow you along graciously with no doubt or pain. Then speaking from his double head, the glorious fearful monster said, I am yes and I am no. Black as pitch and white as snow. Love me, hate me, reconcile. Hate with love, perfect with vile. So equal justice shall be done, and life shared between moon and sun. Nature for you shall curse or smile. A poet you shall be, my son. Oh, I like that. And that's from 1920. So this is a classic one. I really like that. All right. So this has been the Composite Season 4, Episode 15. I will post the link to the article about Haiti. Or if I can't, I'll post the title of it so you can look it up yourself. Again, I'm not a history expert or a sociologist or even a geopolitical expert. I'm an English teacher that talks shit on the internet, and I'm concerned about all of the things. All right, have a great night.